From the very first breath we take, we begin absorbing the invisible architecture of the world around us. We learn what is considered acceptable, what is expected of us, and, perhaps most importantly, how to fit into a system that was designed long before we arrived. Families, schools, religions, and communities hand us blueprints for belonging, and we follow them almost instinctively, not realizing that every instruction subtly reshapes us. We begin to measure our worth by how well we conform. But in this process, something irreplaceable is often lost: our connection to the true self, the essence buried deep within our psyche. Carl Jung devoted his life to studying this hidden inner life. He believed that most of us live like actors cast into roles we never auditioned for. We wear the costumes society gives us, reciting lines written by culture, family, and history, all while suppressing the voice inside that whispers, "This is not who I am." Think back for a moment. How many times have you found yourself in situations that looked perfectly normal on the surface, yet left you drained at the core? Perhaps it was a relationship where you gave more than you ever received. Perhaps it was a job that offered stability but no sense of fulfillment. Or perhaps it was a circle of friends or colleagues who, instead of lifting you higher, dimmed your light until you forgot it was even there. Why do we allow this? Jung's answer was both unsettling and liberating, because we have been conditioned to do so. From childhood, we are trained to suppress what does not fit the mold, to silence parts of ourselves that feel inconvenient, wild, or disruptive. A child who cries too much is told to be quiet. A teenager who questions authority is labeled difficult. A dreamer is told to be realistic. Each time, a fragment of authenticity is pushed underground. But what is repressed does not vanish. It hides in what Jung called the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves we prefer not to see. And the longer we deny it, the more powerful it becomes, erupting in ways we cannot control, in poor choices, in destructive patterns, in toxic relationships that echo the very wounds we tried to bury. This is why, Jung would argue, even when we say we want love, success, or happiness, we find ourselves unconsciously sabotaging those very desires. Deep down, some part of us still does not believe we deserve them, and so we accept less. History itself provides mirrors of this truth. Think of the countless individuals born into rigid hierarchies, medieval serfs bound to land they could never own, Victorian women confined to drawing rooms, soldiers trained to obey orders without question. Outwardly, they appeared to function within the system. Inwardly, many lived lives of quiet suffocation. And yet, those who dared to listen to their inner voice, who defied the script, changed the world. The same is true within us. Every time you feel a pang of dissatisfaction, that quiet ache that whispers, "There must be more than this," it is the psyche signaling that something vital has been lost. That voice is not weakness, nor is it selfishness. It is a call to remember who you truly are, beneath the masks. Jung insisted that our unconscious is not our enemy, but our greatest messenger. Everything you experience in the external world is, in some way, a reflection of what stirs within you. If you find yourself in relationships where you are undervalued, it is often because deep inside there is still a part of you that doubts your worth. If you remain in a job that crushes your spirit, it may be because your unconscious clings to security out of fear, believing you cannot create a life of meaning. Now imagine, just for a moment, waking one day to realize that everything you have sought outside, validation, love, recognition, was within you all along. Imagine discovering that you do not need to prove anything, that you are already enough. The thought is intoxicating, almost unbelievable. But Jung's work reminds us it is not enough to merely imagine it. Transformation begins only when we choose to act on it. That choice, however, is daunting. To know yourself, to face your shadow, to stop accepting less than you deserve. It is nothing short of a revolution. It means tearing down the inherited cage of expectations and daring to walk out into the unknown. And though the path is frightening, Jung warned that the cost of avoiding it is far greater. A life lived in quiet resignation, far from the truth of who you are meant to be. From the earliest days of childhood, we are taught lessons about what is good and what is bad, what is praised and what is punished. A child who speaks loudly may be told to hush. A boy who cries may hear that he must be strong. A girl who asserts herself might be branded stubborn instead of brave. Little by little, these fragments of authenticity, our raw emotions, our spontaneous impulses, our untamed curiosity, are tucked away into the darkness. This is how the shadow begins to form. It isn't born from evil, as some misunderstand, but from rejection. Every part of ourselves that does not fit the image demanded by parents, schools, religions, or society is quietly exiled into the unconscious. Yet these hidden parts do not disappear. They linger, waiting, and eventually find expression in subtle but powerful ways. By the time we reach adulthood, the shadow often controls us more than we realize. We fall into toxic relationships, drawn to people who mirror wounds we never faced. We remain in jobs that crush our spirit because the shadow whispers that risk is dangerous and safety is survival. We repeat self-destructive patterns without ever fully understanding why, as though trapped in an endless cycle scripted by a hidden hand. Jung understood this not as coincidence, but as inevitability. What you resist persists. The things we refuse to confront within ourselves are destined to appear in the external world, disguised as fate. That is why so many of us, no matter how much we claim to want love, freedom, or fulfillment, remain stuck in situations that strip us of dignity. Deep down, a hidden belief insists we do not deserve more. And history offers echoes of this pattern on a larger scale. Entire civilizations have carried collective shadows. Think of the Roman Empire, priding itself on order and discipline, while violence and cruelty simmered beneath the marble veneer. Or Victorian England, draped in moral respectability, even as poverty, addiction, and repressed desires ran rampant in its streets. What is denied in the light returns in the dark, whether in the psyche of an individual or in the heart of a culture. Perhaps you've seen this shadow play out in your own life. A person raised to be the perfect child grows into an adult, terrified of disappointing others, forever people-pleasing, yet secretly resentful. Another who is told anger is shameful may grow into someone who swallows rage until it erupts in sudden, destructive bursts. Someone taught to be silent may find themselves overlooked again and again, never realizing it is their own unspoken shadow that shapes those encounters. The tragedy is not that the shadow exists. It always will. The tragedy is that we are rarely taught to face it. Schools drill us in mathematics and grammar, but never in self-awareness. Cultures honor achievements and appearances while dismissing emotions as weakness. Religions too often confuse holiness with denial. And so, generation after generation, we carry forward shadows we neither understand nor question. But Jung urged us to see this hidden side not as an enemy, but as a path. The shadow is the doorway to wholeness. The very qualities we fear or reject, anger, grief, vulnerability, desire, hold the keys to our authenticity if we dare to approach them with courage. When ignored, they sabotage us. When acknowledged, they transform us. And here lies the paradox. By suppressing these elements, we become less human, less complete. Yet by embracing them, even the darkest parts, we begin to reclaim our power. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The shadow, then, is not merely a collection of flaws. It is the unfinished manuscript of the self, waiting for us to pick up the pen. It is the part of us that longs to be seen, not because it wants to destroy us, but because it wants to make us whole. What we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves does not vanish. It returns, dressed in the clothing of destiny. Jung called this the great paradox of the psyche. The unconscious will project outward what we suppress inward. What is unhealed inside us appears outside of us again and again until we finally recognize it. This is why people so often feel trapped in cycles. You leave one relationship only to find the next partner carries the same wounds. You change jobs, but the new boss treats you with the same disregard as the old one. You move cities hoping for a fresh start, but soon the same feelings of emptiness creep in. At first glance, it seems like cruel fate. But Jung insisted, these are not accidents, they are mirrors. Life, in its mysterious way, reflects the contents of the unconscious. If deep within you there lingers the belief that you are not enough, you will find yourself surrounded by people who make you feel inadequate. If you believe love must be painful, you will unconsciously gravitate toward relationships that confirm that belief. If you believe safety lies only in conformity, you will continually draw yourself into environments that suffocate your individuality. Think of it as a magnet. The psyche attracts the very experiences that reveal what remains unresolved. Not because the universe wishes to punish us, but because the psyche longs for completion. What is unhealed demands attention, and if ignored internally, it manifests externally, again and again, until the lesson is faced. Mythology has always understood this truth. Consider the tragic cycles of Greek heroes. Oedipus, in fleeing his destiny, runs straight into it. Sisyphus, condemned to roll the same stone endlessly, becomes the embodiment of repetitive human struggle. These stories endure because they echo the same principle Jung uncovered, that what we do not integrate within becomes the wheel we cannot escape without. And the pattern is not only personal, but collective. Entire societies mirror their shadows in history's darkest chapters. The French Revolution, born from centuries of repression, erupted in violence as the denied rage of the masses consumed the very order it sought to replace. The rigid moral codes of Puritanism gave rise to witch trials, where fear of hidden sin manifested in persecution. Denied shadows always find a stage, if not in the psyche, then in the theater of the world. But here lies the gift hidden inside the pain. Every recurring pattern is a message. Every draining relationship, every stifling workplace, every coincidence that feels all too familiar. These are not punishments, but invitations. They are the unconscious calling out, see me, hear me, integrate me. Jung urged us to shift perspective. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? We must ask, what is this trying to show me about myself? The difference is transformative. Suddenly, fate is no longer a prison, but a teacher. The endless mirror becomes not a curse, but a map. And yet, this is the hardest step to take, because it requires brutal honesty. It means admitting that the world outside is not the true enemy, that the boss, the partner, the friend who wounds us is only reflecting what lives unacknowledged inside. It means facing the possibility that the life we have accepted is a projection of the parts of ourselves we have not yet healed. This realization can feel like a shattering, but it is also the first crack of light in the darkness. To see the mirror is to glimpse freedom, because what is acknowledged can be changed. The cycle does not have to continue forever. Every great journey begins not with clarity, but with discomfort. Transformation rarely announces itself with trumpets or divine signs. Instead, it arrives as a whisper, a quiet sense that something in your life no longer fits. It is that dull ache you feel in the pit of your stomach when you walk into work each morning. It is the silence after a conversation with someone you love, when you realize your heart feels emptier instead of fuller. It is the quiet exhaustion that greets you at night, even when nothing terrible has happened. This unease is not random. It is the psyche sounding an alarm. It is your unconscious sending signals that you are living out of alignment, that something vital within you is being ignored. Jung believed this discomfort was sacred, a signpost pointing toward individuation, the lifelong process of becoming your truest self. And yet, few of us heed the call. Why? Because to do so requires walking into the unknown. The familiar, no matter how painful, feels safer than uncertainty. Many would rather remain in relationships that drain them or jobs that diminish them than face the terror of change. The known cage seems preferable to the uncharted wilderness. Jung warned that this is humanity's greatest trap, the illusion of safety in stagnation. The comfort zone is not a sanctuary, it is a prison disguised as stability. And like any prison, the longer you remain, the more you forget what freedom feels like. History is filled with examples of this collective reluctance to change. For centuries, entire populations submitted to oppressive monarchies, not because they believed their rulers were just, but because the alternative was unthinkable. Slaves in ancient empires sometimes resisted freedom when offered, fearing the uncertainty of life beyond chains they had come to know. Even revolutions, when they do come, often falter when confronted with the chaos of the unknown. People return again and again to the comfort of familiar suffering rather than risk the abyss of transformation. And yet, every so often, individuals or movements rise who refuse to stay silent. They hear the inner call and act upon it. They are not fearless. They are simply unwilling to remain numb. Consider Galileo, who risked persecution to speak the truth of the cosmos. Or Rosa Parks, whose quiet act of defiance became a thunderclap in the civil rights movement. Their actions remind us of Jung's central message. Transformation always requires courage, and courage is rarely comfortable. On the personal level, the call to transformation can feel like betrayal. Betrayal of the roles you've played, the expectations others placed on you, even the identity you thought was yours. To follow it means letting go of the image you have carefully constructed and daring to see who you are beneath it. That is why so few people answer the call. It demands that you leave behind not only what you have, but also who you have been. And yet the alternative is far more costly. To ignore the call is to live as a shadow of yourself, moving through life as though asleep, repeating the same cycles, and mistaking existence for living. The question is not whether the call will come. It always does. The question is whether you will answer. If individuation, the journey toward our true self, requires courage, then self-love is the first act of rebellion. It is not the sweet, sentimental idea popularized in slogans and hashtags. For Jung, it was something far more radical, the conscious decision to align with who you really are, without compromise. To love yourself in this way means no longer accepting the scraps life offers in place of dignity. It means refusing to settle for relationships where you are diminished, jobs where your spirit is starved, or environments that suffocate your growth. It means facing the shadow directly, and instead of turning away in shame, declaring, "This too is me. I will not disown it." This is why Jung believed self-love was the doorway to individuation. Without it, we remain trapped in the same cycles, always searching for approval, always bending to fit molds designed by others. With it, everything changes. We begin making choices not from fear, but from authenticity. We stop begging for recognition because we recognize ourselves. But make no mistake, this path is not easy. Jung warned that individuation feels like a tearing away. It requires us to let go of identities we have carried for years, sometimes decades. The dutiful daughter who always obeys, the loyal employee who never questions, the accommodating partner who sacrifices everything for harmony. To embrace self-love is to admit that those roles may no longer define us, and in their place, something new, something frighteningly unknown, must be born. Throughout history, we see the same truth echoed in movements of liberation. When enslaved people declared themselves free, they were not simply rejecting chains, they were asserting their intrinsic worth. When suffragettes marched for the right to vote, they were practicing collective self-love in a society that told them their voices were meaningless. When colonized nations rose against empires, they were choosing dignity over submission. In each case, the act of self-assertion was seen as dangerous, even scandalous, because it disrupted the established order. The same is true on a personal level. Choosing self-love will often threaten those around you. Friends may accuse you of changing. Family may tell you that you've forgotten where you came from. Partners may resist your new boundaries, not because they wish to harm you, but because your growth challenges their comfort. To love yourself is, in a sense, to declare revolution in a world built on conformity. And yet, once you cross that threshold, something shifts irreversibly. You begin to operate not from need, but from choice. You no longer cling to relationships out of fear of loneliness, but choose connections that reflect your worth. You no longer tolerate meaningless work, but seek paths that align with your purpose. You stop justifying mistreatment because you have discovered your own dignity. Jung believed that individuation demanded exactly this kind of courage. To face your shadow, to walk away from what diminishes you, to trust that your life can be built upon authenticity rather than fear. This is the essence of transformation. And though many resist it, those who take the leap discover what Jung described as the deep paradox of self-love. It feels like loss at first, but it is in fact the beginning of freedom. Something remarkable happens when we begin to honor ourselves. At first, the world may seem unchanged. Your job is the same, your home is the same, the people around you are the same. And yet, slowly, a shift begins to ripple outward. Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem to align as if the universe itself were conspiring in your favor. When you start to respect yourself, new opportunities seem to appear. When you set boundaries, you suddenly find people who respect them. When you stop chasing validation, you notice that the right connections arrive without effort. Nothing magical has occurred outside. You have changed, and the world reflects it back like a mirror catching light for the first time. This is why Jung believed the unconscious was not an enemy, but a guide. It arranges circumstances not to punish you, but to reveal to you the state of your inner world. When you live in fear, you attract situations that confirm fear. When you live in self-love, doors begin to open that were invisible before. Consider how often history has shown this same pattern. When great thinkers aligned with their deepest truth, their lives seem to take on uncanny momentum. Think of Gandhi, whose private choice to live in simplicity and truth catalyzed a national movement. Or Martin Luther King, Jr., whose inner conviction aligned with a tide of synchronicity that carried his words across the globe. These men were not handed miracles. They embodied alignment, and the world bent toward them as iron bends toward a magnet. And yet here lies the stumbling block for most of us. We demand external proof before we commit to the inner work. We say, I will believe in my worth once someone else recognizes it. I will set boundaries once the right person comes along. I will choose myself once the world shows me it's safe. But the universe does not work this way. The mirror only reflects after you change your stance before it. It is much like a seed buried in the earth. From above, nothing seems to happen. The soil looks unchanged. But beneath the surface, roots are forming, silent work is underway. When the first green shoot breaks into daylight, it feels sudden, even miraculous. But it is the result of what was planted and nurtured within all along. This is the nature of synchronicity. It is not magic in the sense of bending the world to your will. It is alignment, an outward echo of an inward transformation. When you believe you are unworthy, the world supplies evidence of your unworthiness. When you believe you are enough, the world responds with reflections of abundance. Jung's insight is both comforting and terrifying. Life is always listening. The question is not whether the world will respond, but what message you are sending it through your unconscious beliefs. To live in self-love, then, is not just a personal choice. It is a way of entering into dialogue with the universe. And once you do, the coincidences that follow are not coincidences at all. They are the language of alignment, a reminder that when you dare to choose yourself, the world dares to meet you there. Every act of transformation carries with it a moment of loss, a space where what was has ended but what will be has not yet arrived. It is the gap between identities, the silence between chapters, the empty space where the old has crumbled but the new remains unseen. Jung understood this stage intimately. He warned that most people retreat here, clinging desperately to what they know because the void feels unbearable. We humans are creatures of familiarity. We stay in relationships long past their expiration date, not because they nourish us, but because solitude feels frightening. We remain in jobs that drain our vitality, not because they inspire us, but because uncertainty feels more dangerous than unhappiness. We even cling to outdated versions of ourselves, identities we have outgrown, because letting go feels like death. And in a way, it is. The death of illusions, the death of roles, the death of the old self. Jung called individuation a kind of symbolic death and rebirth. To step into authenticity, you must first allow parts of you to dissolve. This is why letting go feels so terrifying. It awakens our most primal fear, the unknown. But history, myth, and spirituality have always reminded us that the void is not our enemy. It is the womb of transformation. In Buddhism, the concept of shunyata, or emptiness, is not despair, but liberation, the fertile openness from which new life emerges. In Christian mysticism, the dark night of the soul is the stage where old attachments fall away, preparing the spirit for deeper union with the divine. In ancient rites of passage, initiates were stripped of their names, possessions, and status, left in symbolic darkness before re-emerging as something entirely new. Every culture has understood this truth. Before rebirth, there must be emptiness. And yet, when the void comes for us personally, we often mistake it for failure. We see the silence after a breakup, the unemployment after leaving a job, the loneliness after setting boundaries, and we panic. We rush to fill the gap with anything, anyone, just to silence the discomfort. But in doing so, we sabotage the very process meant to set us free. The void is sacred precisely because it is empty. It is the pause that allows us to hear our own voice without the noise of others. It is the space where old patterns loosen their grip, making room for something new to take root. To resist it is to prolong suffering. To embrace it is to open the door to transformation. Consider how rivers renew themselves. When floods wash away the banks, the land lies bare, seemingly destroyed. But over time, the soil grows richer, new life sprouts, and the river carves a path truer to its course. So it is with us. What feels like devastation is often the clearing needed for authenticity to flow. The truth is simple, though rarely easy. Nothing truly new can enter while your hands are still clutched around the old. The universe cannot deliver what is meant for you while you are still occupied holding on to what is not. This is the test of letting go. Not just the release of circumstances, but the release of fear. Not just the surrender of people or places, but the surrender of the story that without them, you are nothing. It is in that surrender that freedom begins. No transformation happens in isolation. The moment you begin to change, the world around you notices, and not everyone will celebrate it. In fact, your growth often unsettles those who remain bound by their own shadows. Jung observed this with clarity. When one person awakens, it can act like a mirror, forcing others to confront what they have long avoided. And most people do not like what they see. You may find friends accusing you of being selfish simply because you've learned to set boundaries. Family members may guilt you for forgetting your place when you choose authenticity over obedience. Partners may resist your new strength because it disrupts the unspoken agreements that kept the relationship in balance, even if that balance was built on your silence. This resistance is not always born of malice. Often it springs from fear. Your evolution highlights the stagnation of others, and rather than face their own shadows, they may try to pull you back into the familiar patterns you are leaving behind. To grow, then, is to accept that not everyone will understand you, and some will even oppose you. History provides countless examples. Socrates, daring to question Athens' comfortable illusions, was condemned to drink poison. Galileo, revealing truths that threatened the Church's worldview, was placed under house arrest. Women who fought for suffrage were mocked, jailed, even beaten, not because their cause was unjust, but because it challenged centuries of convenience. Every great change-maker has carried the weight of misunderstanding. And on a smaller scale, so will you. Because individuation is not designed to be universally applauded. It is, by definition, a personal path. To expect others to see what you see or to validate your journey is to set yourself up for disappointment. Jung reminded us, the path to the true self is not meant to be understood by all, it is meant to be walked by you. This is why so many retreat at this stage. The pressure becomes heavy. Loneliness creeps in. The fear of being abandoned or rejected whispers louder than the call of authenticity, and so many return to the cage they once tried to escape. They dim their light just enough to fit back in. They silence their voice just enough to keep the peace. They shrink, convincing themselves it is easier this way. But deep down, the cost of such compromise is unbearable, because once you have glimpsed who you truly are, you can never fully forget. Even if you return to old patterns, a quiet unrest will follow you, reminding you that you betrayed yourself to keep others comfortable. The real test of this stage, then, is not whether you can gain approval, but whether you can withstand disapproval. Can you hold steady when others question your choices? Can you keep walking when others do not walk with you? Can you trust that your authenticity is worth the solitude it may bring? Jung believed this was one of the most difficult trials of individuation. The willingness to stand alone if necessary, to face the world's misunderstanding without abandoning yourself. And while painful, it is also liberating. Because once you realize your worth does not depend on anyone else's acceptance, you become unshakable. To awaken to your true self is not a sudden explosion of light. It is more like the slow breaking of dawn, at first dim, then radiant, until you realize the darkness has quietly retreated. Jung described individuation as this very process, like waking from a deep sleep. At first, the light stings the eyes, uncomfortable, even painful. But once you have seen clearly, you cannot unsee. And once you have tasted authenticity, you cannot go back to the life you once accepted. The unconscious, for all its mystery, is not cruel. Its repetitions, its patterns, its whispers of discomfort, all are meant to guide you home. Every relationship that drained you, every cycle that trapped you, every disappointment that left you hollow, they were not punishments, but lessons. The psyche teaches in echoes until the message is heard. And the message at its core is simple: you are more than you believe. To embrace this truth is to realize that self-love is not a mood nor a fleeting burst of confidence. It is a daily practice, a radical commitment to honor yourself no matter the cost. It is saying no when every part of you has been trained to say yes. It is walking away when fear begs you to stay. It is listening to the quiet voice within, even when the world shouts the opposite. And when you live this way, something extraordinary begins to unfold. The relationships you once tolerated feel impossible to endure. The jobs that once seemed good enough now feel like cages. The excuses you once told yourself, at least it's stable, at least it's familiar, dissolve in the light of self-recognition. The world outside has not changed, but you have. And because you have, the world must. History reminds us that the most powerful revolutions do not begin on battlefields, but in the human heart. Every time a person refuses to settle for less than they deserve, they ripple outward. A woman says no to silence, and generations of daughters find their voice. A man rejects the script of obedience, and whole nations reconsider their chains. When one awakens, many are stirred. This is the ripple effect of self-love. It does not stop with you. When you choose authenticity, you give silent permission for others to do the same. When you live aligned with truth, you remind the world what truth looks like. Jung knew this, that the healing of the individual psyche inevitably impacts the collective. One act of courage can set in motion 1,000 unseen transformations. And so the invitation is this: do not wait for the perfect moment. Do not wait for a sign carved in the heavens. The only sign you need has already been given. It is the discomfort you feel, the longing for more, the ache that tells you life as it is cannot be the final word. That ache is your compass. That whisper is your path. Self-love is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning. It is the decision to stop betraying yourself. It is the courage to face your shadow, the strength to withstand resistance, and the trust to walk through emptiness until new life appears. It is not magic, and it is not easy, but it is the only path that leads to freedom. Jung once said that individuation is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole, and wholeness requires that you embrace all of who you are, light and shadow alike, without apology. When you live this way, synchronicities appear, opportunities align, and life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a flow. The question then is not whether you are worthy. You always were. The question is whether you are willing to live as though you are. The moment you decide, everything begins.